Well, it is that time again. We have had a new set out for long enough for prices to settle, and I went on hiatus for a bit when I should have been making this video, so it's time to talk about what budget grabs you can expect to go find in Tarkir. So I want to go ahead and say, from this point forward, these budget grab videos are effectively going to be considered companion pieces to the deck builder's kit video. Anything you find in here that is a nice budget grab, if you want to be building decks and you want to make sure that those decks are done in a nice and efficient way where you're not having to rummage through a ton of back catalog of cards, then I highly suggest you take these cards out of a box of Tarkir if you bought it and put them into your deck builder's kit. And if you don't know what a deck builder's kit is, I'll go ahead and link that video in the description below. But the quick primer is a deck building kit is effectively all of the cards that are worth using in Commander, and they are sorted by color and often by function. For me, I sort them by color, and then I make sure that mana rocks are separate from everything else, and land is separate from everything else, so that whenever I'm building a deck, I can just basically reach into this kit and start finding the things that I need for it. With that all said, let's go ahead and talk about all the things that you can be looking for in Tarkir. Now, I do want to note one thing. This set seemed to be very, very popular, and as a result, there's only like 10 or so cards that are above $1 at all in this set. It's more than that, I know, but still. That said, there is one other issue. This is a set dedicated around 3-color builds, so a lot of these cards are going to only be useful for 3-color decks. So even if we have something really cool like Roar of Endless Song for Go Big strategies or Mammoth Bellow for the same Go Big strategies, they are still built for 3-color decks, and so you may only be able to use these in a handful of decks. Now, that may dissuade you from putting these into a deck building kit because they are technically more narrow just by the very nature of being 3 colors, but these cards are still worth throwing in if you've got the space. Mammoth Bellow being a nice little card that gives you a 5/5 elephant for 5. Very, very old school costing for a magic card, but it's got Harmonize, so we can then tap that elephant and then get another elephant for 3. Now, this card's going to be very useful in decks that have the ability to copy instants and sorceries, giving them access to some very gigantic creatures, which are very necessary in decks like that really want to protect themselves as they're trying to storm off. Roar of the Endless Song makes the same elephant tokens, but it has a win condition built in, and I think this card is going to be useful less as a win condition and more as a card that once you put it on the board, your opponents will have to remove. A lightning rod, if you will. If you put this in a deck that has a more traditional Anthem and then this on the board, the opponents really are going to want to either sweep your board way earlier than normal, or they're going to try to get rid of the Roar of Endless Song, thus protecting your enchantment if they have a choice between killing only one. For go wide strategies, though, we have a few more cards to look at. Marshal of the Lost with Death Touch and the ability to grant a lot of attack power to a creature based on the number of attacking creatures you have, works really well with the Mobilize mechanic and is just great in any go wide token strategy. Frontline Rush has the same ability, but it also has the ability to make tokens in and of itself, and this is the same rate we've seen on other cards, where you pay 2 mana in 2 different colored pips, and you get 2 1/1 tokens out. If those cards can be thrown into precons and can be usable, this is extra usable because of the extra modality. Stareyed Sky Rider is yet another card that will give all of your tokens flying, and the shocking Sharpshooter is an Impact Tremors that only deals damage to a single opponent. Now, cards like this are technically weaker than Impact Tremors and cards like Impact Tremors, but this does have some extra utility in that A, it's a creature, so we are able to clone it and get more access to its ability, and B, since it only deals the damage to a single opponent, you can politic this around, which can sometimes be a little more important than just being table enemy number 1. Where this deck, or not deck, but where this series of cards really seem to shine, though, is a lot of draw spells that are worth running in Commander. Like, a lot of them. We've got Cruel Truths, which lets us literally dig through 4 cards, throwing 2 into the graveyard effectively. It's essentially the same card as Read the Bones, but you're paying 1 extra to make it an instant and use Surveil instead of Scry. I think it's pretty decent, even if you can get stuff cheaper on rate, but especially if you're a budget player, this is going to help you dig through your deck really well. Seize the Opportunity is another card that has modality. A lot of these cards have modality. Being able to exile the top 2 cards of your library for impulse draw, we always need more of these for Storm decks. Storm decks really benefit from having a critical mass of these cards. This is because Storm decks tend to also have a lot of rituals, and those rituals usually are in red, so Seize Opportunity allows you to convert that red mana into more cards. Simpsing Appraiser says when it enters, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them in your hand, the other into your graveyard. This is fantastic for blink strategies, especially blink strategies like Sephiroth that really like strong ETBs and throwing cards into the graveyard. Then we have Breaching Dragonstorm. When this enchantment enters, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card, and go ahead and cast it if its mana value is 8 or less, which is like 90% of the spells in Magic the Gathering. If you got a dragon that enters, it will immediately put this back to your hand. I think this is fantastic in any plays from Exile style deck or big mana style deck that really wants to see those cards, or even just like a straight up Cascade deck as opposed to an enters from exile like Faldhorn is going to be able to make use of this, because sometimes that spell that you get is going to be, anything but your Apex Devastator, and therefore you'll be able to make use of it. Thunder of Unity is another Impact Tremors that also has a draw spell attached to it. It's pretty great. Roshas Bargain is another card that lets us dig 4 deep into our deck and just pull one of those cards into our hand. Cruel Truths is easier to put in more decks, but Roshas Bargain can be played in Sultai only. Well, 5 color as well. And honestly, 3 mana to put 2 cards in hand is the rate of Divination. That's a fair rate, but being at instant, so it's Power Crab Divination, like everything else in Magic the Gathering is, and being able to put cards in the graveyard for Reanimator decks, honestly, this thing is fantastic. Amling Stormshell is an all-star for turtle decks and also counter manipulation decks. Yes, it says turtle spell, and there's not going to be that many people playing turtle decks with this card. Maybe they will, but the fact that this card can attack, put 3 stun counters on itself, and draw lots of cards, and then you can use a card like Nesting Grounds to move these counters onto your opponent's cards to prevent them from being able to be untapped, means that this is going to find its way into decks that like manipulating counters more than it's going to find its way into turtle decks, solely because there are more counter manipulation decks than there are turtle decks. Rediscovered the Way lets us dig through our library at a decent rate, and it has a double strike ability at the end, meaning this is going to be another card that opponents are going to want to get rid of once they see it. Dragonologist lets us dig 6 cards deep into our library and yank out an instant sorcery or dragon from them, and it gives our untapped dragons hexproof. This thing at 32 cents is doing so much work for dragon decks, it's kind of insane. United Battlefront is just Collective Company, but it's getting non-creature cards, which can be very, very important for decks that really need that. Like in Aristocrat decks, United Battlefront's going to be kind of fantastic, because digging 7 deep into your library and being able to get your Phyrexian Altar out, being able to get your Vampiric Rites out, being able to get your Ghoulish Procession out, this is going to do a lot of work for decks like that. Hollowmurk Siege gives us more counter manipulation. Whenever you attack, put a 1/1 counter on a creature, giving it menace. And if a counter's put on a creature we control, we can draw a card. We choose which one of those we want to do. Both of those are fantastic rates. The Abzan side is what we want to do for go tall strategies to guarantee menace, and the Sultai side is what we want to do for go wide strategies. Though, if we are playing a deck that is Sultai colored, we do have the ability to clone this enchantment and get both sides, meaning every time we attack, we'll be able to get a free draw from the Abzan side, triggering the Sultai side of the other Hollowmurk Siege. So, just a fun thing to think about. Just if you have access to blue, then go ahead and use it for that. Then we have the Winter Night Stories card. Draw 3 cards, discard 2 unless you discard a creature card. This is your usual Thirst for Discovery style card that is in a ton of sets, but it's a sorcery instead of an instant, but the trade-off for that is that it does have Harmonize, so for effectively 1 mana, we can cast this again later in the game. Honestly, there's a ton of decks I can see this being used in, and I'm probably going to get a copy of this and put it in Sephiroth, because 3 mana for a draw 3, discard 1 is perfect in a deck like that, and being able to use it twice. I'm already using Faithless Mending in that deck, so this card definitely deserves a spot. I did mention counter manipulation strategies, so Stalwart Successor is a fantastic card for that. Whenever one or more counters is put on a card, go ahead and give it an extra one. It's a mini Harden Scales. We get to play Harden Scales in Standard, so I'm happy about that. This is great. Host of Hereafter enters with 2 1/1 counters, and if another creature dies with 1/1 counters on it, we can put those counters on another creature we control. So between Host of Hereafter and Stalwart Successor, we have Harden Scales and the Ozolith in Standard. Yes, they cost more than Harden Scales and the Ozolith do, but if you are playing a deck in Standard, then cards costing more than they do in Modern is pretty normal for you. Also, if you're playing a deck in Commander, Host of Hereafter and Stalwart Successor are going to be fantastic additions to a counters deck, giving you more ways to get these abilities. And it's better to use Host of Hereafter than something like Death's Presence just because it costs less than that. Then we have some clones in here. Every set has its basic clone, and Naga Fleshcrafter is a fantastic clone we have access to. It has the ability to renew from the graveyard, allowing all your creatures to become the copy of another creature we control. And Marduk's Siegebreaker can get rid of a creature on our board, allowing us to copy it multiple times throughout the game. I also mentioned Blink strategies earlier, so we've got 4 cards for Blink strategies. Sonic Shrieker, being able to deal damage to people and force them to discard cards, is just a fantastic thing to do in Blink. If you've got a teleportation circle and you're ending your turn, blinking this and making an opponent constantly lose cards is a fantastic way to punish them for sitting down at a table with you. Disruptive Stormbrood has the Omen mechanic, so for 2 mana, we do have the ability to blow up low-power creatures, and that's kind of relevant, but the most relevant thing for me, again, for Blink strategies, is having yet another card that can blow up artifacts or enchantments, but it does have the modality of being able to use it as an Omen card if we need. Speaking of modality, one of my favorite cards from the new set is Fangkeeper's Familiar. It blows up enchantments, it lets us surveil, it counters creature spells, it gains us life, it does so many things, and it's just a Mystic Snake with black attached to it. I think this thing is fantastic. Then we have the Magmatic Hellkite. When this enters, we can destroy a non-basic land and opponent controls, and then let them search for a basic land type and put a stun counter on it. Now, this is land denial, and if you are playing Blink, this will effectively become mass land denial, but if you're playing a strategy playing against a strategy like, say, Deval, and they are constantly getting back their Cabal coffers over and over again, this is a way to deal with stuff like that in your local meta, and you can choose not to blink this, so you can play this card fairly if you need to. I think having some type of land removal in your deck is part of responsible deck building, so I don't see a problem with this card. I just need this card to be utilized on the decks that deserve it most. And speaking of decks that deserve stuff, Aristocrats always deserve stuff, and I'm happy to see that Harden Technician is effectively a Vampiric Rite, but in the creature spot. Pay 1 mana, sack a token, draw a card. Most of the time in Aristocrats, you want to be sacking your tokens anyway, so this definitely can deserve a spot in not only budget lists, but full power lists that really want some extra draw. Then we have the Barren Step Siege, which has it at the beginning of your end step. If a creature died under your control, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So we have a budget Grave Pact available now for Aristocrat decks. That's something that we only had before in Butcher of Malakir, and I'm happy to see that we have a budget, and albeit a little clunky, but still a budget Grave Pact available for everybody who wants them. Now, my favorite kind of strategy in Magic by far is a graveyard strategy. I love being able to reanimate cards, so luckily there's a lot of graveyard synergies in here. Anok Wayfarer has made its way into Pauper. It's in my Pauper Dredge deck, and it's the usual Satyr Wayfinder style effect of mill a bunch of cards, put a land into your hand. Great if you've got stuff to reanimate. Essence Anchor, you've probably seen this in a bunch of Deval decks already. It's the usual 3 mana at the beginning of your upkeep, Scry 1 from the Lifecrafter's Bestiary, but it's Surveil 1 here, and it allows us to make zombies if a card has left our graveyard this turn, which is really easy to do in Aristocrat strategies. Then we have Lie in Wait, which lets us return a card from our graveyard to our hand if it's a creature, and then deal damage to another creature equal to that card's power. So it's a Balagued recovery that is also a kill spell. It's very hard for me to argue against how good this thing is. Kishless Skimmer is a draw card that gets you cards based on your graveyard synergies. Songcrafter Mage can reanimate a spell. It's basically a Snapcaster Mage, but for some reason in the world of Magic the Gathering that we're playing in right now, this is a 26-cent card, and I really expect this thing to see competitive play in formats other than Commander, but at 26 cents, I guess the community doesn't see the same thing I see. Maybe I'm just a Snapcaster Mage fanboy, and seeing this come into a set just makes me overjoyed, but who knows? Maybe I'll have to make a Teamer Spellslinger deck that utilizes this thing to the nines. Then we have Lotus Light Dancers, a 3/6 with lifelink, and when it enters, we get to tutor 3 cards of different colors out of our deck and throw them into the graveyard. That is incredibly powerful. This is a Buried Alive that costs 2 more, but it's a 3/6 lifelinker with a booty of 6, so it dodges most red board wipes that aren't Blast Act or Chain Reaction. This thing's great. Then we have Karu Gold Keeper. This thing was an all-star in my pre-release, and it seems like it's going to do a lot of work if you are willing to put in the effort into making Karu Gold Keeper do its thing. For 4 mana, you get a 3/3 dragon, bad rate, but anytime a card leaves your graveyard, you get to get a treasure token back if it's your turn. It's got a renew ability, which is okay. I don't care about the renew ability. What I care about is the ability to generate treasures hyper fast in a deck with black and green, which is the kind of deck that gets cards out of its graveyard faster than any other color combination, except maybe black-white. Then we have Ython Road Watcher. Speaking of black-white, we have an Abzan card here. When it enters, if we cast it, mill 4, and then return a creature from our graveyard to the battlefield. If you are playing Abzan Aristocrats like Necrobloom, this is your girl. The Ython Road Watcher is going to be able to get you the cards you need in the graveyard very quickly, and it's got a reanimate attached to it as well. 4 mana for a reanimate is a good rate if you've already got your lower cost reanimates, or you're playing on a budget, so you've got to run cards that are going to cost a little more anyway. Thing is fantastic. Then we have Oriole Procession. It's a Balagued recovery, but it's in Simic, and it costs only 2. And it's instant. Like, the what's not to love? Glacierwood Siege is another modal card. The Teamer mode lets you cast instant or sorcery cards. Whenever you cast instant or sorcery cards, a player mills 4 cards, or you can play lands from your graveyard. I don't know if you know this, but Crucible of Worlds is a good Magic the Gathering card because it's a 3-mana card that lets you play lands from the graveyard, and that's all the text that's written on it. Glacierwood Siege does the same thing for 3 mana, and it's in a safer card type. If you've played a lot of Magic the Gathering, you know that artifacts are only a safe card type if a red player is not at the battlefield. If they are, they've got Vandal Blast, and that's where Crucible of Worlds tends to fold. But if you have an enchantment, it's usually a lot more rare to find people running enchantment sweepers unless they would have swept both, like a Bane of Progress, right? So this dodges more removal, and it lets you get the cards out of your graveyard at the same rate as Crucible of Worlds. It's not quite power crept Crucible of Worlds, only because it does have mana pipping, but like, if you're playing a landfall deck, the mana pipping doesn't matter, so it may as well be a strictly better card for you. Then we have Pination. It's an Abzan 3 card that lets us return a permanent card from our graveyard to the battlefield and give it hexproof and indestructible. This is it's really hard to say it's power creeping, but it's kind of power creep on a previous black card that did the same thing, but only with indestructible. We can use this to get some of our most powerful cards out of the graveyard and then make them incredibly hard to deal with. I'm going to use this on Archon of Cruelty and laugh my ass off as my opponents wonder how they're supposed to deal with a hexproof, indestructible Archon of Cruelty that is giving me all of my life back from all the damage they've dealt and just draining them of resources. Then we have Casari Revenant. This one is a power creep of Vampire Nighthawk. Flying Death Touch lifelink. It's got the same mana cost and the same toughness, but it's got 1 more power, and it's got the renew ability, so we can use this to put a flying Death Touch and a lifelink counter on a target creature whenever we need if it's in our graveyard. So here's the scenario. You get your commander out and you have Casari Revenant, and then Casari Revenant dies because your opponents realize that getting 3 life every turn and being able to block anything in the game because you have Flying Death Touch is really, really busted. So then you're about to swing with your commander and you realize, oh, I can pay 3 mana, I can get rid of the Casari Revenant, and now suddenly my commander, who could be like a 5/5 or something, has all the Casari Revenant stat line and is able to hit you for commander damage. This thing is great. I honestly think even in just like strict Voltron strategies, if you've got the ability to mill cards or discard cards, Casari Revenant may actually make its way into those too, because having Flying Death Touch and Lifelink on a commander that cannot be removed with like an Abrade or something is just kind of strong, right? Speaking of removal protection though, we do have a bunch of protection spells here. Alesia's Legacy gives a creature indestructible and Death Touch. Lightfoot Technique gives a creature indestructible and flying. We have the reprint of Snakeskin Veil, giving us access to Hexproof, and we have Duty Beyond Death, which can give all of our creatures indestructible if we sacrifice a creature. And we already talked about ramp strategies a little bit, so let's talk about the ramp cards that came in here. Roamer's Routine gets a basic land out of our library, but it's got Harmonized, so we get to get 2 basic lands out of our library for 4 mana. It's an explosive vegetation, but you get to pay its cost over the course of 2 turns instead of just 1 turn. Honestly, not a bad rate. Then we have Encroaching Dragonstorm. This sets actual explosive vegetation, but every time a dragon enters our battlefield, we get to put this back into our hand. Repeatable explosive vegetation that also allows us to have increased power for Enchantress commanders. Yeah, I'm game. I'm 100% here for it. Dragon decks get Sarkhan Dragon Ascendant. Whenever it enters, we can behold a dragon, show a dragon to our opponent. Then we create a treasure token. 2 mana to create a treasure token is great for dragons because they really want to get their stuff out early, and they don't mind it being treasures. I promise you, dragon decks have so many ways to make treasures. Getting rid of a few of them early does not hurt. And whenever a dragon we control enters, we get to put a 1/1 counter on Sarkhan, and then he becomes a dragon with flying afterwards, which is a neat little trick he gets to pull after that. Not bad. Then we have the Teamer Battlecrier. During our turn, spells we cast cost 1 less for each creature we control with power 4 or greater. So if you've been at my LGS, you have seen me drop this down in my Eshki deck, and you've seen me quite literally storm off with a creature-based deck, using this and Gwenna and Eshki to just dominate an entire table. This thing is absolutely nuts. For 3 mana, so it's the rate of a Foundry Inspector, we get to have cards cost, what, effectively nothing. Especially if you've got Gwenna out, now suddenly any card with 1 or 2 pips is just a free spell, and you get to keep casting them over and over and over again. And remember, the Teamer Battlecrier is not discounting just creatures, it's discounting every card. So in my experience, I've been using this with Sunbird's Invocation. So I'll have a board set up, I'll play the Teamer Battlecrier, say, okay, response? No? Okay. Pay 1 mana, Sunbird's Invocation? Are you ready for me to dig through my entire deck in a single turn? No? Well, if you don't kill my commander, this is lethal to everyone. Teamer Battlecrier, this is an overperformer, and at 50 cents, it is very hard to argue with going to pick one up. I promise you, this thing is fantastic in the decks that can cast it. Then we have some removal cards I want to talk about. Coordinated Maneuver is not quite as good as Thraben Charm, but it is still pretty decent, letting us have creature removal and enchantment removal on a card. At 3 cents, you could probably pick up a couple of these if you are a budget player and be pretty happy. Dragonclaw Strike is another nice removal spell that also, I mean, it features Eshki, and I'm starting to feel things for Eshki, but man, she's not even Golgari. What's wrong with me? Doubling the power of a creature on your board and then having it fight means it almost always will win the fight. And if you're playing a Voltron commander, this is just doing all kinds of work. Heritage Reclamation is a strictly better return to nature, so now you can run both of these in your decks. There's now no more reason to run a card like Naturalize in Commander. I don't like that. I love Naturalize, but now that you have 2 Return to Natures and this one can draw you a card when you use it to cuck the reanimation player, honestly, just kind of a fantastic card. Glacial Dragonaut allows us to have a draw spell or a looting spell that can also deal 3 damage to something, but the big reason I like this isn't because it's a looter spell that has Lightning Bolt glued on. I like it because it's got Harmonize, and that's just super simple to trigger, especially if you've got a commander with 3 or 4 power. Then, after that, we've got Awaken the Honored Dead. This is a wonderful card I need a lot of copies of. Blowing up any non-land permanent for 3, so it's the rate of a Beast Within or a Stroke of Midnight. But then it gets to mill us 3 cards. Oh, so we get to do more with this. And then its final ability lets us discard a card and return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. So let me get this straight. This card is a slightly less powerful Beast Within. Then it's a slightly less powerful Stitcher Supplier. Then it's a slightly less powerful Bala Ged Recovery all at once. Yeah, no, Awaken the Honored Dead. Just a fantastic... Sultai hit it out of the park in this set. And that makes me happy because that's my favorite color combination in Magic. Then we have Death Begets Life. Destroy all creatures and enchantments. Then draw a card for every permanent destroyed this way. Now, this is a funny card because it's one of the few cards that can blow up creatures and enchantments at the same time, especially in this color combination. But the reason I think it's hilarious for me is this is literally just the best thing green, black, and blue can do glued together. Blowing up all enchantments is the green thing, blowing up all creatures is a black thing, and drawing a card, an obscene amount of cards, is a blue thing. But once you combine them all together into this, well, I was playing at Taco Mac and I used this card and I drew 36 cards. And I did that specifically because I wanted to kill myself that game, and that was the fastest way to do it. But just having a board wipe that says, no, I draw an army's worth of cards. Now that you've lost your board state, kill me now, or you just simply won't be able to play the game. Just, this thing's fantastic. Voltron Strategies got a little bit of love with Wingspan Stride, an enchant creature that gives it 1/1 and flying. But the big thing is that we can return this to our hands. So especially if you're playing a budget deck and you don't have access to all the protection spells, then Wingspan Stride can be used so that when your commander is getting sniped off the board, you can still keep your evasive card. And if that commander's an Enchantress commander, then this is likely going to be a draw spell for you as well. So in decks like Galea or Suvasa, this thing just does a lot of work. And there is a single land of the new cycle that I think is worth picking up, and it's Kishla Village. It is okay, but the fact that we can get Surveil too as our mana dump, there's lots of situations where that can be useful. Now, there is one other type of card that I want to go over, and I usually go over these first, but I want to do it last this time because there's fewer of them and it takes me so long to explain them. I want to talk about the commanders from this set. Not the commanders from the precons, but the commanders that were in the 99, or not the 99 of the set. I'm brain poison. I want to talk about the commanders from this set that I think are worth running. And you've probably already seen this thing in Brawl, and people were just going nutso over it, completely crazy over Kotus the Fang Keeper. It's Villainous Wealth in the command zone, and the minute you give it an enchantment that gives it any amount of power, this thing goes completely crazy. So, like, with most Voltron strategies, you're trying to get a creature up to 21 damage and then hit an opponent. For Kotus, you want to get to 20 damage exactly. That gives you the maximum amount of cards from an opponent while keeping them alive so that you can cast those cards and then kill them on a subsequent turn. Kotus the Fang Keeper is just bonkers strong, and I'm happy that I haven't had to see more of this thing at tournaments. This thing is nutso. Narset Jeskai Waymaster. At the beginning of your end step, discard your hand. If you do, draw cards equal to the spells you've cast this turn. Holy shit, this is a Storm Commander's wet dream in the 99, and it's a Storm Commander in its own right. Then we have Felifar, Dawn of the Abzan. So, oh my gosh, when it enters or attacks, we can sacrifice a non-land permanent and then put a 1/1 counter on every creature we control. So any deck that has death triggers, which Abzan decks very typically do, and decks that have a lot of go-wide tokens, which Abzan decks, again, typically do. Look at Necroblossom or Necrobloom. This thing is going to give you a very, very mini Craterhoof effect over and over and over and over and over again, especially if you are using a Strionic Resonator to copy this effect, so you can get more death triggers, more increases in power. The thing is just kind of fantastic. Eshki Dragonclaw, you guys have already seen me gush about. I made an Eshki Dragonclaw Enchantress deck, and she does tons of work. The 1/1 counters and the draw put her over the edge. In Mardu colors, though, we have Zergo Thunderous Decree. Mobilize 2, so whenever it attacks, we can make 2 1/1 creatures. During our end step, warrior tokens we control have this token cannot be sacrificed. So, This card does a lot of work on its own, obviously, but the thing that I want to note is that a lot of the cloning in Mardu colors comes from red, and when you clone a creature with red, you create a token that has to be sacrificed at the end of the turn. It's the most common kind of clone in red. So, if Zurgo is your commander, you get to use things like, Flame Shadow's Conjuring, where you get to create tokens of creatures on your board, and now suddenly they won't be sacrificed at the end of the turn, meaning you get to keep all of your stuff. I want you to imagine for a moment, and this is not something you should be doing, by the way. This is Timmy brain entirely. But I want you to imagine for a moment a board state where Zurgo is out. You have some way of killing the legendary rule, like a mirror box on the board, and then you've got an Atali Primal Hunger, right? And then, Primal Storm. I don't remember which Atali it is. The red Atali. You have red Atali, and then you clone it with something like Flame Shadow Conjuring. Okay, now you've got two Atalis. One of them has haste, you get the Atali effect, but the Atalis don't go away. And so, over the course of the game, you just keep making more and more Atalis because you've got a Maskwood Nexus out that's making sure the Atalis are warriors. Now, obviously, this is a 5, 6, 7 card nutso combo that's never going to happen, but if it could, that would be funny. But no, Zurgo in a Warriors deck is going to do a lot of work if you are running those cloning effects. Then we have Taval, Arbiter of Virtue. This is the one that I'm very interested to see how people are going to try to build this. So, he says that whenever we cast spells, we lose life equal to the spell's mana value, which is insane, and the spells we cast have Delve. Now, he's got the ability Lifelink, so we can get a lot of life with this commander. But this is one that I think is going to be very interesting to see how people try to build. Because Delve is such a strong ability, and this commander really wants you to have a nice and set up graveyard to play something like an Archon of Cruelty out with, just being under rate. I don't know. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see how people build this thing. I really think in a dredge deck, you might be able to make something work with this. But we'll see. We'll see. Then we have Sidisi, the Regent of the Mire. This lets you sacrifice a creature you control with mana value X other than Sidisi, and then return a creature with mana value X+1 from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, what is this? It's a birthing pod for the graveyard. That's what this is. So if you're playing a deck, like, say you're playing an Aristocrats deck, and you pull out your Stitcher Supplier. You crack the Stitcher Supplier, and it turns into your Zulaport Cutthroat. You crack your Zulaport Cutthroat, and it's going to turn into your Ophiomancer. You crack your Ophiomancer, it's going to turn into your Smothering Abomination. You crack your Smothering... You see where I'm getting, right? Like, this allows you to just grab the card you need at any point, as long as you have a deck that has mana values that are very, very close. I think you're going to be able to do a lot with this in Aristocrat decks with cards in the 1 through 4 mana value, especially if it's the commander, but also in the 99, honestly. And, well, that does it for everything in this set that I think is worth picking up. It's all stuff that is $1 or under. That's 63 cards, so you could get one of every card I talked about here for $15.67, which is kind of insane, right? That's an insanely low price for getting some of the best cards that have been printed in Magic the Gathering recently. Unfortunately, we always have some of the best cards printed in Magic the Gathering recently because every set has power creep. I'm going to make a video about power creep at some point and how power creep in Magic the Gathering is unnecessary because it's a rotating game. But yet we still have it, and I don't understand. Anyway, that's a video for another day. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'm sorry that it took me so long to get to this, but it at least gave all the prices of Dragonstorm time to settle out. That all said, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already, subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, insert into video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravelern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Mark Anthony, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that. Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.